Hi, this is the plant-based nutritionist, Cath King at Seeking Health. And today's video is an introduction to some new training that I'm doing. I'm currently participating in the World Peace Diet Facilitator Training Program. And this involves some videos and audios and some readings, but it also has some study questions. And so I've decided to record my take on the answers to these questions and share them with you. Now, just to introduce you to what this is all about, the World Peace Diet is a philosophy that is originated from Dr Will Tuttle, and he's written a book by that name, and obviously he's got this facilitated training program as well. And this is a bit of a deviation for me. I'm an eco-nutritionist, and so I normally deal a lot with science. I'm a bit of a science geek. I like the research, I like to see the studies, and I'm looking usually at the effect of nutrition on the human body and the effect of our food choices on the health of the environment as well. And while I'm very strongly drawn to this very scientific side of my nature, I also realize that there's another side to food, another side to health, and another side to me. And that's what this training program is helping me to explore and expand on. And so instead of presenting you with the scientific understanding of food and health in these videos, this is going to be more just of a conversation, me having a conversation with myself and with you if you would like to engage with me as well. If you have read Dr. Will Tuttle's book, The World Peace Diet, and would like to comment on what I'm saying in these videos, I would really love to hear your comments and have some kind of conversation with you. And the World Peace Diet is a very important piece of work, a very important philosophy, in that it proposes that our food choices are so all-encompassing, they are so powerful that they don't just affect our health, they're not just affecting the planet, but that they have far-reaching effects in terms of our spiritual development, our spiritual nature, in terms of war and in terms of other forms of oppression, and that there's a kind of karma involved with all of this. And so it goes quite deeply, and it certainly is kind of out there in suggesting that by changing the way we eat, we can have a very strong and a very positive influence on all of these other world issues that are troubling us, that all issues that we're having problems with in the world could actually be solved by a change in diet. And so the first module that I've been looking at is the power of food. And in today's video, I'd like to talk about the language of denial, the significance of the I, thou, and I, it mentalities. I'd like to look at what is the source of the power of food, and what is compassion, and how does it relate to our food choices. Now, first of all, in discussing denial arises out of the language of denial, I feel arises out of an ideology of denial. The reality that our food choices contain misery, cruelty, and exploitation and violence. And so we don't look. We don't want to see that. We keep these realities hidden behind the walls of factory farms and slaughterhouses. And Dr. Melanie Joy has coined the phrase carnism to describe this ideology, and she also suggests that one of carnism's strongest defences is denial, that we don't want to see the actuality, the reality, that is kept hidden from us, but that also the ideology is hidden because it's a dominant ideology. And when something is a dominant ideology, it's just accepted as a given. It's not questioned. We can't see it because we're in it. And this denial, this is a situation of denial because also the reality of how animal foods are processed and obtained is actually in direct opposition to our true nature of compassion, and also to our image of ourselves, the image that we hold of ourselves as being a good person. And this forms cognitive dissonance. And so we have to hide and deny the truth to ourselves to maintain that ego image. And this denial, the language of denial, and the way that the ideology denies the actuality of what's happening, makes it very difficult to raise these issues in public. It's almost become taboo to have any discussions around the ethical nature of our food choices. It's seen as very bad manners. It can make people feel uncomfortable. And I would really like to point out that in reality, it's our own behaviour and the conflict of our behaviour with our true nature and our ego image that is creating this discomfort. It's not the person who is questioning us or bringing these things to light. And we use certain language in our denial. We refer to animals, to food animals, as it instead of he or she. And like I said, carnism is invisible in and of itself, and yet when we name it, it gives it visibility. And I recently did a video about Cecil the Lion, and in that video I made the point that one of the reasons that carnists, people who eat meat, are getting so upset about the hunter killing Cecil the Lion is that Cecil wasn't an it. They weren't denying his individuality. He had a name, and he was given, we could see that he had a personality, whereas most food animals are just placed in a group. A pig is a pig, and no, all pigs are the same, whereas in reality that's not true. All pigs are individuals in the same way that Cecil the Lion was an individual, in the same way that you or I are individuals. And when we look at the source of the power of food, we can see that food is our most intimate connection with nature and with culture. So food literally becomes our cells, our organs, and the tissues of our body. We become what we eat as it forms us physically. So food starts out as an object, something that's not me. And then through eating, it's transformed into subject. It's transformed into me and my body. And food is a big part of how we pass on the values of our culture to the next generation. Spiritual teachers throughout history have said how important food is for our spiritual growth. And this is seen through the food rituals that all cultures have. All cultures have traditions around food, and a lot of spiritual teachings involve food with customs like fasting. And food is a necessity. It's one of the biggest necessities of life. And from infancy, food is seen as a sign of love. Mothers feed their children out of love, and we often will connect warm feelings of feeling loved with our mothers providing us with food. And in my experience, the transition to a vegan diet has been very freeing. You know, when I look at it, apart from the health aspects of how it's affected my physical body, it's also had some very profound effects on my spiritual growth, on my clarity of mind, and my freedom of thinking. I feel like I'm no longer bound by my conditioning. I can see past it so much easier and with so much more clarity. And when exploring the language, or when exploring our mentality around I-thou relationships or I-it relationships, we can see that we develop our sense of I, our sense of ourselves as individuals, in relation to others, not in isolation. And if we develop our I in relation to others as being conscious, sentient, feeling beings, that's when we will develop an I-thou sense of self. Whereas if we develop our I mentality in relation to others as being objects without feelings and desires of their own, we develop an I-it sense of self. And typically, if we have the I-thou sense of self, we relate to others with respect and sensitivity. And if we have an I-it sense of self, we relate to others as instruments to be used for our own purposes. And again, we can see this in referring to a cow, a pig, a chicken as an it. So again, we're going back to that language of denial. And we can see, again, Cecil the Lion as being an I-thou relationship, as opposed to the I-it relationships of how we relate to chickens and pigs and cows. And we can see Cecil as being conscious, sentient, feeling, whereas the other animals are just objects to be exploited for food. And then looking at our development of compassion. What is compassion and how does it relate to our food choices? And compassion is the response to the suffering of others. This is, I think, I wrote down a dictionary definition. So it's the response to the suffering of others that motivates a desire to help. It motivates people to go out of their way to help. And when we have this compassion, this desire to help animals and include them in our circle of compassion, we're then faced with the truth that eating them is incongruent with compassionate behavior, and our only choice is veganism. So I'm looking forward to exploring more aspects of the World Peace Diet with you, and exploring how what people are eating is how that's at the root of the world's problems, the world's biggest problems, the environmental destruction, war, chronic degenerative diseases, and our spiritual growth and development. And when we look at this food of animal origin and our violence towards these food animals, when we look at it in this way, food is no longer a peripheral issue, but it's at the core of all the world's problems. And so I really see this training program and my study on this as maybe being the most meaningful work that I'm going to end up doing with my life. So I'm very honoured to share this with you, and I hope that you get something out of it too. Thanks for watching.